In the world of criminology, a cipher is usually a tool of war, a method for spies to trade state secrets, or a killer's taunting message left at a crime scene. But in the case of Lister, cryptography was used for something far more personal: survival. For over a century, her diaries lay dormant, a cold case file filled with secrets hidden in plain sight. This is the story of how a brilliant woman encrypted her life, and how that code was almost lost to history forever. Welcome to History of Criminology. Today, we're not examining a murder or a heist. We're investigating a crime of the heart, a life lived in defiance of an era, all documented in a code so complex it baffled experts for decades. Let's open the case file on Lister and her crypt hand. Our primary evidence: 26 volumes of diaries, totaling over 5 million words. At first glance, they seem like any other 19th century journal. Page after page of elegant cursive detailing weather, business transactions, and social visits in Halifax, England. But then, abruptly, the handwriting changes. It morphs into a dense block of strange, alien-looking symbols. This is Exhibit B, the crypt hand. Roughly 1/6 of her entire diary is written in this code. This is where the real story lives. So, what was Lister hiding? To understand the motive, we need to understand the woman. Born in 1791, Lister was a landowner, an industrialist, a mountaineer, and a scholar. She was fiercely intelligent and unapologetically ambitious in a world that expected women to be none of those things. She managed her family estate, Shibden Hall, ran coal mines, and traveled extensively. She was, by all accounts, a formidable figure. But her most radical act was how she chose to live and who she chose to love. And Lister was a lesbian, a term that didn't even exist in her lifetime. She referred to herself as having a masculine nature and documented her romantic and sexual relationships with other women in meticulous, explicit detail. In the eyes of early 19th century society, this was not just a sin, it was an unspeakable deviancy. Discovery would have meant social ruin, ostracization, and utter catastrophe. Her diary was her only confidant, and the code was its lock and key. Now, let's analyze the cipher itself. This wasn't some simple Pigbin or Caesar cipher taught to school children. Lister developed her own sophisticated substitution cipher, a unique alphabet she called Crypt Hand. She created it as a young woman with her first lover, Eliza Rain. It was a calculated system, a chaotic mix of Greek letters, algebraic symbols, zodiac signs, and even punctuation marks used in unusual ways. It looks like gibberish, but look closer. It was a system designed for speed and secrecy. She needed to write her intimate thoughts quickly, often in the same room as her family, without raising suspicion. What made it so difficult to crack? To key forensic features. First, it was primarily a substitution cipher, where each symbol corresponded to a letter of the English alphabet. But she didn't just swap one for one. The system had quirks and variations she developed over years. The second and more brilliant element was the formatting. Within the encrypted sections, she removed all word breaks and punctuation. This created a solid, impenetrable wall of text. For a cryptanalyst, pattern recognition is everything. We look for single-letter words, common two- or three-letter words, and repeating patterns. By removing the spaces, Lister made this standard method of breaking codes incredibly difficult for anyone just glancing over her shoulder. It was a fortress of characters, protecting her innermost self. For 50 years after her death in 1840, the code held. The Diaries sat in Shibden Hall, their secrets silent. They were a time capsule waiting for a key. Then, in the late 1880s, a distant relative named John Lister inherited the estate and discovered the hidden collection. He was a historian, intrigued by the sheer volume of his ancestors' writings. He and a friend, Arthur Brill, took on the challenge. They were the first investigators on this cold case. They painstakingly compared the coded sections to the plain text, searching for clues. Eventually, they found a slip of paper tucked inside one of the books, a partial key to the cipher that Anne herself had created. It was the breakthrough they needed. Slowly, symbol by symbol, they began to translate. The wall of Crypt hand started to crumble, and the raw, unfiltered truth of Anne's life poured out. They expected business secrets or political commentary. What they found was something far more shocking to their Victorian sensibilities. They read about her seductions, her passionate affairs, her detailed descriptions of lovemaking, and her deeply personal feelings about her own identity. John and Arthur were stunned. They had unlocked a Pandora's box of what their era considered moral depravity. This is where the case takes a dark turn. The evidence was too dangerous. Brell's advice to John was clear and chilling. Burn the books. Destroy the evidence. Erase Lister from history. In his view, publishing this would be a scandal of monumental proportions, tarnishing the family name forever. He saw the diaries not as a historical treasure, but as contraband, the documentation of a moral crime. Think about that from a modern perspective. The first person to crack the code immediately recommended destroying the proof. It's a testament to how terrified society was of a woman like Lister even existing. But John Lister couldn't bring himself to do it. He was a historian, and he understood, perhaps on some level, the importance of what he had found. But he was also a man of his time, terrified of the social fallout. So he made a compromise. He didn't burn the diaries. He buried them. He took the 26 volumes and hid them behind a wooden panel in Shibden Hall, sealing them away from the world once more. He closed the case file, hoping it would never be reopened. The secrets were safe, but they were also silenced. It would take another 100 years for the code to be fully broken and shared with the world. In the 1930s, the diaries were discovered again, but it wasn't until the 1980s that historian Helena Whitbread took on the monumental task of transcribing and publishing the coded sections. Society had finally evolved enough to begin to understand Lister, not as a moral deviant, but as a trailblazer. The world was finally ready to read her story. And Lister's Crypt hand was more than just a code. It was an act of defiance. It was a meticulously crafted system that allowed her to live a double life, documenting her truth while presenting a respectable face to the world. She successfully encrypted her own existence, creating a cryptographic legacy that outlived the prejudices of her time. She gambled that one day the world would be ready to listen. And thanks to those who chose preservation over destruction, She won that gamble. Her case file is finally closed, not as a story of crime, but as a triumph of survival. Thank you for joining me on this investigation into one of history's most fascinating personal codes. If you found this case as compelling as I did, make sure to like this video and subscribe to History of Criminology for more deep dives into the forensic files of the past. Let me know in the comments what historical mystery you want me to investigate next. See you in the archives.